All right. Well, looks like we don't have some people are starting to join in. Hello, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We're going to just give it a few minutes for anyone to join. Feel free to post any questions you have in the chat if you've got anything. All right. Well, I will say it again. Welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn. I am Jeremy. I will be leading our call today with a couple other members of the team here to help as well if necessary or if so desired. But I will be leading our call. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat or Q&A, and I'll be happy to discuss anything that we've got. Just as a quick reminder, please feel free to check out our solutions marketplace. If you want to go and check out some of the various different applications and things we have available. I know we typically talk about that every day, so um, every lunch and learn. But if you would like to go check those out, please do. They may have a lot of useful information or interesting concepts that may be beneficial for you. So definitely check that out. Or you can check out our decision support YouTube channel. There we'll be placing all of the lunch and learns, but also additional content as well, sometimes with discussing steps or anything like that. I think we're going to be starting a new series for just kind of a deep dive on certain steps, things like the run flows for list step or list mapping that are pretty common use cases and popular uses, but can be a little complex at times. So we're probably going to start making some videos on steps like that and kind of deep dive into them and look at where they may be used. So, check out that channel. We may have some things up there that may be useful for you or interesting to you. With that, since I don't have any questions, I might kind of just take a look at decisions, show some things, some interesting concepts that I've been taking a look at, and just to kind of get some information. But I'd still be happy to discuss anything that you all have if you have anything additional. Um, so one thing that I think might be kind of interesting, something that gets overlooked a lot that I'd like to kind of take a look at is some of the permissions. So unless we get some more questions, I'm going to kind of do a little dive into permissions. Because there's quite a few things that I think may be taken for granted or people maybe don't even think about or realize in decisions. So maybe someone out there is looking for understanding more about permissions, and this might be something interesting for them. So the first thing about permissions is there are three default groups within decisions that you get as soon as you look at decisions. Once you have it downloaded, you have all these other ones. Some of these are examples that I may have created myself at different points in time. But we have administrators, all users, and designers. And the thing about each of these is they have different accessibility and different features that they have available to them for things that they're able to actually look at. So if I log in as someone who's just in the all users group, I'll be able to kind of look at and see only things that the basic users have ability to access. And so that does not include projects. The projects folder, it only includes normal folders, basically. So anything that's built in a normal folder, which, in version 9 is going to be something that's in your public folders for dashboards and things like that. In version 8, it's things that are built on normal folders and not in, designer folders and things like that. So you can see here, this is just a basic all user account, and I have access to only some normal folders that I have permissions to access. I can also access the workflow catalog if I have any items here that I have, access to, or I am able to or allowed to run if I have those permissions set up, right? But you can see there as a regular, just all user, nothing else added, right? They have very basic and kind of simplistic permissions here. And then if we go one tier higher, the next tier up is the designer group. So the designer group still has access to, the same exact things that the all users group has, but they have access to a little bit more as long as they have, permissions to, open up certain things. So you'll see that here I have permissions to access projects, right? So I can open the projects folder and take a look at any projects that I have permissions on. I guess this account I haven't actually given them permissions to any of the projects that I built yet, but you can still see they have access to this, so then they can actually go into any projects that they have permissions on. And here's a couple things that I haven't transferred to version 9 yet, but you can kind of see they have access to open up these folders. They can see designer folders now in addition to normal folders, and they also have these actions that allow them to create flows and rules and all those kinds of things. Since that's kind of like the goal of a designer, right, is to be able to build the processes and everything within. So that's kind of what we're looking at here with a designers group. Still have access to the workflow catalog, anything that's in your public folders, all that kind of stuff. Those things are still available here as well. So those permissions there, kind of a little bit more, but you'll notice one thing is missing from my main account, and that's the system settings. The system settings is something that is only available to administrators. So someone in the administrators group will have access to the system settings so that they can adjust all those things. They can, change accounts and groups and edit those, look at a number of other things. Maybe their goal is to set up the designer repository settings, that kind of thing. And so we'll be able to kind of access those and take a look at those things, and everything. So that's what an administrator can do. So a lot further. And then in addition, administrators don't necessarily need full permissions or like specific permissions to access some of these things. I haven't explicitly allowed this account because I'm not even logged in as an admin account. I'm logged in as my personal account with my email, right? So I don't even explicitly have permissions to access this, but I do have this available, to look at here as well. So I can see all of the projects here, everything in my folders, access to everything that I have here in decisions. So those are the like natural groups that decisions, the default groups that decisions has automatically, when we're looking at things. Those the main defaults and like the default permissions that they have. But then you can also further drill into those permissions. VT, I will get to that in just a second. I will gladly demo that. Um, I I do see we actually have a question from Alexander here. So I'm going to address that super quick just in case you want that info. And then if we don't have other questions, we can jump back to this. So Alex, you wanted to know when yesterday's Lunch and Learn will be uploaded. Robert, are you on the call right now?
I'm literally, as we speak, I'm porting it over. Apologies, Alexander. I got caught up yesterday, but literally, I would say 3 minutes, maybe.
Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Nope. All good. Thank you, Robert. So there you go. Should be up very soon. All right. Perfect. Um, all right, great. So now that we're back in my administrator account, I'll kind of point out that impersonations concept here, which is what if you haven't noticed, that's what I was doing actually right now to switch between the couple accounts. I've been logging in as them, so you can actually set up impersonations on an account. So if I go and I edit this account, you can do this upon creation, or you can go and edit an already created account if you want to. you'll actually notice that there is a section down here on the account entity here for allowed impersonations. And basically what this is you can assign an email, multiple if you'd like, one email, whatever that is, and saying that this account can be impersonated from, whatever other account. So in this case, I wanted access to just to my main account that I use here. So I put that email here. And you can also set expiration dates if you want it to be, somewhat limited, which is probably a pretty good practice since you, in most cases, probably don't want someone to, consistently be logging into other users. But this is just, it's a good kind of like a generally good, quick way to, log in as an account just to kind of view information or see how they view things. Especially if you're just looking at like, what I've been kind of talking about, permissions and seeing if they have these permissions, what can they have access to, or what can they see? It's not necessarily the best um, uh, concept to use for actually like using data. I don't think I have like an actual good example of this, but in some cases, when you're actually running, um, utilizing like a project and you're running data with your project, a lot of times um, if you use that impersonation, your data will actually reflect that. Oh, I actually do have it. Perfect. So your data will actually reflect that. So in this is a case entity training project that I have here. And for testing, I ran this while I was impersonating an account here. So like the manager that had to approve this request, I had that manager set with impersonation. So instead of logging out and logging in as the manager, or opening up a different browser and logging in as the manager, I just use impersonation so that I can go in and have that manager complete it. And you can actually see that it reflects that. So this wasn't completed by Allison Mitchell. It was completed by me logged in as Allison Mitchell. So, when you're completing things, the impersonation isn't necessarily something that you want to utilize or, use to like complete assignments and, when you're actually doing official data, but just for testing and, tracking some of these things while you're building, it's a very quick and easy way to kind of go and jump through, and check, hey, is this, permission working properly? Or, did the manager receive the task that I sent them? Did I set that assignment up correctly? Things like that. It's a nice, just like a quick way to do it, because then you can go to login as and select whatever accounts. In this case, I have two accounts that I'm allowed to impersonate. Then I can go ahead and impersonate them and log in as them to, view the data and everything. But again, not something that you want to use because it will be reflected in your data. Um, that it wasn't exactly Allison Mitchell that did this task. It was me logged in as Allison Mitchell. Um, so a lot of really good stuff. I do see we do have quite a few people in the chat as well. So I will reiterate. I'm just kind of going over some stuff about permissions. And VT asked me to explore or kind of point out a little bit about impersonations. But for those of you that have joined, if you have additional questions, anything else you'd like to take a look at, please feel free to post your questions in the Zoom chat or the Q&A, and I can discuss those things. Okay. So yeah, so that's impersonation and how it does affect your data. Always be a little careful with that, but it's a nice, easy kind of testing process, and I just like to do it in my testing to just make sure things are working. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a little further look because we have different a number of different permissions that you can set and allow users to have access to here within decisions. And I kind of wanted to just take a quick look at how some of these permissions work and where they can be set up. So I'm going to take this designer account and I am going to kind of slowly increase the permissions that they have access to and talk about what they do so that we can kind of see the difference of how they, build up over time. But permissions are very important because, you don't want to give users access to see things that you don't want them to see. And I think a lot of times people maybe don't think about it and they're like, hey, like especially in training, or it's easiest to just give them can use, can open, can view access. But then maybe you may accidentally give them access to view important information that isn't theirs. Like, depending on what kind of processes you're doing, there's a lot of sensitive information that you want to keep, uh, out and stuff like that. Um, you want to be very careful with those kinds of things. So, that kind of thing, you want to also be very careful of, when you're utilizing permissions. So always be very intentional when you're setting your permissions up. So let's say I set that designer user to only have can use permissions on this My Projects folder. So you'll notice if I log in as that user, uh, if I log in and I take a look at my folders here, I don't have a folder called My Projects, right? So they don't have permissions to view it. So I will not be able to actually see this folder in my folder tree to open up that folder or anything like that, right? So since I do not see it here, I cannot actually utilize it in any way, from this view. But since I have can use permissions on it, and I have all the flows and things within it, if I have a way to access those flows, like for example, if it's in a dashboard that's somewhere else, and I have viewable permissions on the dashboard, or if it's an item that's in my workflow catalog so that I can run flows from here, um, you know, and I have can use permissions, then if I click on something, right, this travel request is a flow that's inside that My Projects folder. So even though I don't have the ability to view the items in the folder, I can use them. So if I run something from the workflow catalog that I'm allowed to run, I can still use those flows. So I can now fill out this form, submit a travel request, and I can use the information that's from that flow to complete this process here, right? So I have can use permissions, but I can't actually view them. I can run that thing, in that particular way, right? So can use permissions is very limited, and it kind of helps me to prevent people from, having access to looking inside all of my stuff, but they can still run their flows and things like that. So that's a great way to allow people to start a process, but not be able to look at or access anything else within the process. Especially if they have, a dashboard or a workflow catalog to utilize it. So now we're going to further go down and we're going to add can open and can view. Can open, there's probably very rare chance that someone's going to use can open without the ability to can view. But this is basically can open gives you permissions to open subfolders and process folders within a folder. And so if you have like a very niche use case where you don't need them to actually see the information or to see like the main folder, but if you disable permission inheritance and then, further folders down, if they can just have the ability to open them, then they may be able to open something that's not in the, without having to go through the parent, a redirect link to open up a folder, things like that, that may work. So if you want them to open a very specific subfolder within your parent without them actually being able to view the whole thing or everything else within it, that's what can open would do. It's a little bit niche. I don't actually have anything like set up to easily kind of to demonstrate at the moment. But if we add can view, and I'll actually demonstrate one other thing too. If I deselect these other two and I only add can view and I save permissions, it'll actually automatically check those other options. So it works like that with this system. If you select one, it'll pre-select all the ones above it, just because that's how the permissions are designed to be allowed to work, right? If I want someone to have permissions at one thing, they have to have permissions on some of the other elements to actually access it. So you'll see if I go back here now that it's saved, it automatically rechecked can use and can open. And that works for all of these. In order to administrate, I have to have all these other, options available to me. But now that I've added the ability to view, I can actually go in and take a look here now. And if I go back to that folder, this, which wasn't here before because of the can use permissions, is now here. And I can now view this folder. And I can view all the items and things in it. Since I'm a designer user, I can look at designer folders. And everything, right? But I can see all the elements within my item here. So now since I have that permission. However, this designer does not have edit permissions. So you'll see, even though I'm in the flows, I actually don't see the actions to create a flow or to create a rule or anything up here, right? Like I normally do if I'm on just like a regular account and stuff like that, right? And so I don't have access to actually create things. And if I click on one to try to open it like I might normally open up a flow to edit it, you'll see I'm actually not getting anything here. It will start to load, but what's going to load is not the actual flow designer. It's going to open up the history folder of this particular flow that I clicked on, right? So since I don't have access to actually edit this particular flow or edit anything within this folder, I only have access to view it. I can only view the information related to it. So I can look at history stuff, but I can't actually go in the designer and change anything. Right. Oops, I keep going to the wrong folder every time. So then we can slowly start to kind of add more actions here and provide more permissions for this user, so this user can now go further into this project and do more with it. If I want to slowly add more actions to be available to them, that kind of thing, I can do that and kind of provide more things. So I'll do a couple at a time here now. Like I can edit. Let's say I can add, let's say I can delete, right? Edit allows me to actually open the designers and make changes and things. Add allows me more opportunity to add, I think tags are either included in can edit or can add. I can't remember. Um, but adding tags to something, it's in one of these two for sure. Add also allows me to add if I want to add like entity extensions or anything like that. And stuff like that. Uh, and so so anyway, the can add will allow me to add comments. It allows me to add, entity extensions and things like that if I have any of those built out, stuff like that. And then delete, exactly as it sounds. It gives me the ability to delete something. Um, so now that I've added a couple of these, let's go ahead and log in and take a quick look. And now you can see, same exact things, projects and everything, right? But if I go to that same exact place, you'll see now I'm in a designer folder, and since I have edit access, I can create flows and rules and things again, right? I click on a flow, it's going to open up that actual flow for me so I can edit the flow and everything. If I right click on something, I still have these editing actions, but you'll see I actually have a lot of actions here now that I might not have had before. Um, things, especially in the more section, under manage and more, this is where a lot of those new items have been added. I have the delete function now. I can delete, which I wasn't able to do before. I can, I think manage tags was not there before. I'm able to manage tags now. These items down here are all come from the add. So I can add an entity if I have an entity, or I can add a case if I have a case that has that add function allowed, things like that. So, a lot of these items here that weren't necessarily there before are added because I've added those particular permissions. And stuff like that. So, as I add more permissions, I'll see more actions here that I can add on, folders and, entities and different things like that. So I can add more things and make more changes and stuff uh, to them. And again, whether it's flows, reports, folders, whatever, all the actions kind of slowly change and add different elements to them. And then every time I go to that settings folder, it's not where I'm making changes. My projects, manage permissions. If I go back to editing these permissions, the last one that I'll show off here is can administrate. Can administrate is like basically giving them full permissions to do everything. So now this person will actually, it'll check everything. Even the ones below it actually. Can administrate is, I see you added that, VT. That is correct. Can administrate will automatically check everything, including these other actions and stuff down here. But yeah, can administrate gives you full permissions. You'll have all of the actions and everything that you can do as if you were an administrator. But the thing with this is it's only on the folder or the elements that you specifically provide that data to and everything, right? So, my projects is the only folder that this account is an administrator for. So I don't have all those actions on, this example folder, for example. On the My Projects folder, I have more things. If I go to more, I have a lot more options now here, some things that weren't there. Setup assignment rules wasn't here before. A number of these different, changes and things that I have the ability to adjust and add and make changes to and things. So this list gets increasingly larger when I provide more permissions. But again, I'm only the administrator for this My Projects folder, right? So I'm not the administrator in decisions, so I don't have my system settings cogwheel down here like I do on the actual administrator account. So that element is still account based, right? Based on those specific groups that you're in. But these permissions are on the folder level and everything like that. So that's where I kind of can have that access. With that, that's pretty much everything, concluding the permissions kind of stuff. So you kind of have an idea. A couple other things. I know VT, you're kind of posting a couple things. You had a question about the can view history permission and if you being able to view it. There isn't directly a permission related one. The only additional ones are the ability to see hidden items, archived items, or view the browse page details. So, those are things, if you need to, obviously without administrate, but, you can block hidden data things. So, there's a number of, entities and things within decisions that are hidden automatically. So if I want to, block a user from being able to actually access or like view those items, in my report and everything like that, if I'm in the folder view, I can view hidden items, right? And so, a number of these things, some of them, you have access to. If you right click, you can view history and things like that. If you don't have those actions available, they might not be able to view those things. It does definitely raise some question, about, I don't know for sure if everything, like how exactly all of those work, but, like being able to look at and change like the look and feel if they're blocked out of hidden things, they won't actually be able to open up and view that like this entity that where the look and feel stuff has changed. Or in this case, right, I have a rule flow that's being utilized in an active form flow, right? Then you can block them out of being able to actually access these or look at these in the folder view and stuff like that. Yeah, so those are our permissions. The other thing as well. We have, can somebody use a name session for things that the name session was not exposed to, but account under that name session is allowed to do? I believe the answer is yes. Name sessions are kind of, I'm not like an expert in name sessions, so don't fully quote me on this, but I believe, you have a name session. Like if I open up, um, configure an integration with something, and I view those details. You'll always see that named session there. And as part of setting up a named session, you will get the URL with the ID of the name session there. So I think if you'd kind of have to be a little familiar with like the URL because you'd have to manipulate a URL to include the named session details, in the URL and kind of knowing how that changes and how the URLs and decisions works. But you technically could. Although maybe not. Maybe it's not exactly it. Maybe it's slightly dependent. It does kind of change a little bit because it isn't quite in the URL like I was thinking. Um, I do know that named sessions are only really meant to be used with like a post call, so you have to be very careful with those because it's not secure in other ways. So that's something to keep in mind. I think if you do yeah, if you do like a dashboard, for example, there we go. If you use it on the dashboard side of things, so maybe not in a flow like I just looked at here a second ago, If you're using viewing integration details for a like a folder or a dashboard like this, right? And I take and I like you look at the setup for that, right? That simply is just going to take, the folder ID of the dashboard, and then it adds the session ID with those details there. I don't like, this is simply just a URL that it grabs. Like, this URL still exists even if even if I don't have this configured or set anywhere else, right? A URL, and I can go ahead and just go to it and it'll log it in for me, right? I didn't actually do anything or anything like that. So I would imagine you have to be very careful with the named sessions, but I think it only really applies to folders specifically, because those are the ones where that named session will end up in the URL with the session ID and everything. So if someone knew the session ID and then they knew where to place this in a URL, um, you might be able to make it work that way. And I think that's why, your name sessions are supposed to be, very specific. I hope that answered your question. Um, but if not, let me know and I can try to go get a little bit more detailed. Do we have any other questions today? Oh, okay, good. Yeah. No, thanks, VT, for kind of directing and getting a couple other kind of pieces of information out there. Uh, Definitely good for other people to make sure they know that. All right. Well, I think if we're not going to have any other questions, we can go ahead and end our lunch and learn today. So hopefully, it gives a little bit of insight on how permissions work and maybe some of the things you have to be careful of with folders and things if you're using named sessions with permissions, and just kind of a little bit of security with those, and kind of a little bit of dive on how permissions work. Um, Otherwise, that's pretty much all we've got for today. Um, Thank you all for joining. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. We will resume our lunch and learns next week again. Um, and our schedule for that, for who will be leading, will go out sometime early next week. So thank you all for joining. We hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you all next time on Lunch and Learn.